Elise Harrington looked him straight in the eye. "You're fired." The words hit like glass shattering on marble. Noah Reed didn't move. No pleading, no panic. Just a quiet breath, the kind of silence that makes power nervous. From behind her mahogany desk, Elise waited for the usual breakdown. But the man standing before her wasn't usual. His voice was steady, almost gentle. "If that's true, ma'am, please don't tell my daughter. Let her believe I'm still trying." For the first time in years, the billionaire couldn't speak. The test she'd designed to expose weakness had just exposed her own. Across 60 floors of polished air, the city roared below, oblivious to the moment everything in her world began to crack. What could make a woman who owned half of Manhattan question the meaning of strength itself? Stay till the end of this story on Canada's Heartfelt Tales. And if you believe in second chances, like this video and subscribe for more true stories that'll stay with you long after the screen fades to black. The room was still after that single line. "Please don't tell my daughter." For the first time in her career, Elise Harrington didn't know what to say. The clock on the wall ticked loud enough to cut through her composure. Noah Reed sat straight, eyes calm but tired, the kind of tired that lives behind the ribs, not the eyes. He didn't plead for mercy. He didn't explain himself. He simply waited. Elise finally cleared her throat. "That's all," she said, the words more brittle than she meant them to be. He nodded, stood, and left with quiet dignity. The door clicked shut, and with it something cracked open inside her. That night, the city below glittered like a promise she no longer believed in. From her penthouse, she looked down at the streets and thought about the man she'd fired as an experiment. Her father would have approved. "Pressure reveals truth," he used to say. But what kind of truth was this? A man stripped of his job and still protecting his child's faith. She couldn't stop seeing his eyes. Days passed. Elise buried herself in work, in numbers, in the noise of power. But the silence in her mind grew louder. She started reading Noah's employee file at midnight, scrolling through reports, shift logs, attendance notes. A single pattern emerged. Reliability. No complaints, no shortcuts, no excuses. The kind of worker the world never notices until he's gone. Down in Queens, Noah was packing Annie's lunch while pretending not to worry. He'd told her he was taking some extra days off. She believed him. Children always want to believe their parents are strong. He smiled as she left for school, but when the door closed, the smile vanished. He stared at the rent notice on the counter and whispered, "We'll be fine, baby. I promise." At the tower, Elise was fighting something she didn't understand. Guilt. She tried to bury it beneath board meetings and polished smiles, but Noah's words clung like smoke. She began watching him through security footage, telling herself it was performance review follow-up. What she saw broke the distance she had built her life on. Every clip was the same. Noah arriving early, helping co-workers, cleaning when no one else would. When a busser dropped a tray, he knelt to help pick it up. When a guest complained, he apologized for things he hadn't done. He moved like a man who carried both burden and grace. Elise paused the video, leaning back in her chair. Who fires a man like that? The next evening, a thunderstorm rolled over Manhattan. Elise sat alone in her glass office, watching lightning split the skyline. Her phone buzzed, a call from the restaurant floor manager. "We've got an issue, ma'am. Reed's asking if he can bring his daughter tonight. His sitter's in the hospital. Says she'll stay in the back, quiet." Elise hesitated. The company policy was clear. No children on site. But something in her said yes. "Let him bring her," she replied, then hung up before she could explain. By 8 that night, she found herself downstairs, hidden in the shadow of the kitchen door. Annie sat on a milk crate with a coloring book, tiny legs swinging, head bent in concentration. Her father brought her a plate of fries and kissed her hair before rushing back to the bar. Elise felt her throat tighten. The air smelled of roasted garlic and warm bread, but all she could sense was the weight of humanity she'd forgotten existed. Hours later, a commotion, a small cry. Elise turned just as Noah appeared, holding Annie in his arms. The girl's cheeks were flushed, her breathing shallow. "She's burning up," he said. "I need to get her to a hospital." He tried calling a cab. None answered. Elise didn't think, she just said, "My car." Now. They sped through the rain in silence. The wipers scraped a frantic rhythm. In the rearview mirror, Elise caught glimpses of Noah whispering to his daughter, murmuring courage into her fever dreams. The sight was raw, unguarded. By the time they reached the hospital, Elise wasn't a CEO. She was a human being terrified for a stranger's child. Hours passed in the sterile white of the ER. Machines beeped softly. Doctors said it was only a viral fever. Relief hit like sunlight after days of gray. Noah sat beside Annie's bed, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. Elise stood by the window, watching the city blur beyond glass. He spoke first. "Thank you for driving us. You'd have done the same," she said. He smiled faintly. "No, ma'am. You don't know me that well." She turned toward him. "I'm starting to." The words hung there, fragile and strange. For the first time, Elise talked about her father, about the tests, the rules, the cold lessons wrapped as strength. Noah listened quietly. When she finished, he said, "Strength isn't surviving alone. It's surviving for someone." That line landed deeper than he knew. Elise looked at Annie sleeping peacefully and whispered, "Maybe I'm just learning that now." The next morning, tabloids exploded. A blurry photo showed Elise carrying Annie into the hospital, Noah behind her. The headline screamed, "Billionaire CEO's secret family." Stocks trembled, rumors spread, and vultures circled. The boardroom turned into a courtroom. Men in suits demanded explanations. "Distance yourself from him," they said. "Fire the employee. Save the brand." Elise felt the old voice of her father whispering, "Survive, even if it means standing alone." But for once, she didn't want to stand alone. Still, pressure wins when fear is near. That afternoon, she called Noah into her office again. He entered, guarded but polite. Elise couldn't meet his eyes. "You'll need to take a leave of absence," she said softly. He stared at her, the disbelief in his eyes sharper than any insult. "So that's it. You're letting them win. It's temporary." "No," he interrupted. "It's cowardice." The silence that followed was unbearable. Then he said the one thing she wasn't prepared for. "You tested me to see who I was. Now I see who you are." He left without slamming the door. That made it worse. Elise sat frozen, his words replaying like a broken record. For 3 days she barely slept. She ate alone, thought alone, hated herself alone. Somewhere inside, her father's voice still called this strength, but all it felt like was loss. On the 4th night, she opened Noah's file again, and saw the note about his wife's death. Car accident. A 6-year-old left behind. A promise kept by a man who never complained. Elise pressed her palm to the page. The paper felt warmer than her own hands. At dawn she made her decision. By sunset, she was standing outside Noah's apartment in Queens. Rain slicked her coat, dripping from her hair. She knocked. When the door opened, Noah's expression hardened instantly. "What are you doing here?" "I needed to talk," she said. "You've said enough." "Please," she whispered. Something in her tone, real, unpolished, made him pause. He stepped aside. Inside, the apartment smelled of coffee and crayons. Annie's drawings covered the fridge. The living room light flickered slightly. Elise sat on the couch, hands trembling. "I'm sorry," she said. Noah folded his arms. "You didn't just fire me. You made me feel small." "I know," she said, voice breaking. "And I was wrong. I thought control made me powerful. But all it made me was afraid." She slid an envelope across the table. "A new contract. Director of Operations. You deserve this." He didn't touch it. "I don't need your pity." "It's not pity," she said firmly. "It's respect." For a long time neither spoke. Then a small voice came from the hallway. "Miss Elise." Annie peeked out in pajamas, eyes wide. Elise froze. The child ran and hugged her. "Daddy said you were busy, but I knew you'd come." That hug did what no boardroom ever could. Elise knelt and hugged her back, tears falling freely. Noah watched quietly. When Annie asked, "Is Daddy going back to work?" he nodded slowly. "Yes, sweetheart. He is." Weeks later, the truth finally broke free. Elise called a press conference. Cameras flashed, questions flew, but she spoke calmly. She admitted everything: the test, the scandal, the mistake. "I once believed compassion made leaders weak," she said. "But I met someone who taught me that kindness isn't the opposite of strength. It's proof of it." The world listened. Some laughed, some left. But the people who mattered stayed. The company recovered. Policies changed. Workers were given childcare support, flexible hours, and real recognition. Meanwhile, the board member who'd leaked the photo, Gerald, thought he'd won. He whispered to investors, planned Elise's removal, until the truth came out. Traced IP logs, internal emails, his signature on a payment to the tabloid. The board voted unanimously for his termination. Elise didn't gloat. She simply handed him the same words he once gave her. "It's not personal. It's business." When he walked out, cameras caught it. And for once, justice wasn't quiet. A year later, the rooftop garden bloomed on Harrington Tower. Employees brought their kids on weekends. Annie ran through rows of flowers, laughing under open sky. Noah stood beside Elise, no titles, no pretense. Just two people who had both learned to survive for someone. "Do you ever miss the old you?" he asked softly. She smiled. "Not for a second." "Good," he said. "Because I like this one better." They watched Annie chase butterflies across the roof. The sun dipped behind the skyline, bathing everything in gold. The city that once felt cold now looked almost human. Elise turned to him. "You taught me something I'll never forget." He raised a brow. "What's that?" "That strength isn't measured in how much you can hold alone. It's how much you can hold together." And somewhere far below, in the heartbeat of the city she once ruled from a distance, life, messy, unpredictable, beautiful, went on. But for those who still thought power meant cruelty, Elise Harrington's story became a warning. Because the next time someone in that tower tried to test an employee, the new director of operations was the one holding the report. And he never forgot what it felt like to be on the other side of the desk. The rooftop garden glowed under the last trace of daylight. Petals swayed gently in the breeze as the city below hummed with quiet life. Elise stood beside Noah, her reflection softened in the glass, no longer the untouchable figure who once ruled from 60 floors above. She had learned something no boardroom could teach. That power meant nothing if it couldn't protect what was real. She watched Annie run between rows of flowers, laughter echoing against the skyline. There was no title, no wealth, no armor, only peace. For years, Elise had believed survival was strength. Now she understood it was love that kept people standing when everything else fell away. The woman who once tested hearts had finally found her own. Noah looked over, smiling quietly. "You did it," he said. Elise nodded. "No," she whispered. "We did." As the camera pulled back, the rooftop shimmered against the gold horizon. 3 silhouettes framed in warmth, proof that redemption doesn't come from fortune, but from courage. If this story moved you, show your support. Like, share, and subscribe to Canada's Heartfelt Tales to help us bring more stories of truth, change, and hope to light.